Episode number 339, Sweet Sound, the Power of Discipling in Worship with Yancy. Let's do it.
This is the definitive podcast for helping you plan, create, and execute dynamic worship experiences at your church. Useful, practical content in the areas of production, worship, communications, first impressions, and more. This is Making Sunday Happen.
Well, hey guys, this week's show is brought to you by That Church Conference. My friend Justin Dean leads that conference with the team at Tithely. Our team will be there. We would love to see you in Atlanta, Georgia on May 4th and 5th. Well, this week on the podcast, I welcome back my friend Yancy. Yancy is a singer-songwriter, worship leader, and now author. Her brand new book, Sweet Sound, is available now, and we're talking all about the brand new book and the power of discipleship in worship. A great book for worship leaders and especially those who lead the song set for kids in your kids ministry, but great insight today for anyone who leads people in worship through song. We're also going to start a brand new segment called 5 Questions with Yancy, just having some fun. That will be later on in today's episode. I'm going to let you hear a little bit more about That CC, and then we're going to jump right into my interview with Yancy. Here we go. Justin, what's going on, buddy?
Hey, Carl, man.
Hey, so I'm doing awesome, man. So That CC this year, give me the lowdown, give me the dates, the speakers. Throw it down for me, buddy.
Man, I am pretty excited because I got to tell you, it's been a while since we've been in person with this community of church communications leaders. And, we had to go online only because of stupid COVID. But we're back. We're going to be in person, and it's May 4th and 5th. We've got the John Maxwell Leadership Center here in Duluth, Georgia. Awesome venue. It's going to be quite amazing. We're building out the stage already and designing all that and kind of going all out this year. And thanks to the fine people at Tithely, we've got some resources behind this, and we're just so excited, man. We got Allie Beth Stuckey, Pastor Anthony Murray from Oasis Family Life Church. Haley Vituris is coming back. We've even got Dustin Nickerson coming doing some comedy. And we've got quite a great lineup. Mark McDonald, Ben Stapley, Rob Lauder. And I got to tell you, I'm super excited about this because the guys from Black Bar are coming. I don't know if you're familiar with them. Stars on YouTube, man. Yeah, they are. I've had them on a couple of times. Dude, they're so good. They're surging. You got my buddy Jason Moore coming. So we have a coupon code. So 1230 is the code for $50 off. Absolutely. So if you use the code Carl, it actually charges you $50 more. That's right. So you want to use 1230. That's right. To take the discount off. Not add to. All right. So that's at thatcc.com, right? Thatcc.com. Yes, sir. Thatcc.com. That's where you go to grab your tickets. All right. Give me the dates one more time. May 4th and 5th. So you can go to Mile. Awesome. May 4th and 5th, thatcc.com. Again, the code 1230 at thatcc.com for $50 off. Hope to see you guys there. Hey guys, today I welcome Yancy, worship leader, songwriter, producer of hundreds of songs, and now adding author to her bio. Also, the Dove Award winner will be added to your bio as well. You're just all kinds of happy the last few months. Books and Dove Awards and all kinds of crazy, Yancy. It's been a fun season for sure. Love it. I bet. So we've been hanging out at kids conferences and trying to stay home with our family as much as we can. But I'll say this: it's been great for me, and you know the kids circuit a lot better than I do. We've only been in the kind of the kids conferences the last little bit, but seeing and hearing from people that use your music, use our media content, and just getting to talk with them one-on-one and see them and hearing their struggles and encouragements and all that. It's just a huge blessing to me. Do you feel the same? Oh, absolutely. It's always great to put faces with names and just hear about
their church family, their community, the kids that I get to be a part of impacting through the songs I write and the videos that, we've made together, supplementing those songs. And it's, I feel it's certainly one of the greatest honors in my life to be a part of what churches do and helping kids learn how to live for and love Jesus with all their heart.
I'm always amazed by that. And I hope that wonder doesn't go away in me of just how God is using and the impact that, and it's not, there's talent there that we're trying to be humble for, but just to watch God working around the world, literally, and what he's doing is just so humbling to me.
And absolutely. I think it's very easy, to be working on the things that we work, so much of it's through the internet and by putting resources out there and whatnot, and just kind of go through the motions of our day-to-day life and kind of feel like life's pretty ordinary. I'm taking my kids to their sports thing, I'm seeing a friend, exercising, doing all the things. And then you get a message on social media or an email, or, we ran a report and spent some time digging into it this fall. And I think it was 167 countries that pushed play on my music at some point last year. And, all of a sudden in those moments, it becomes so small and tangible and real. And I'm just, like you said, it's humbling, and you realize, oh my goodness, like I am a part of the Great Commission happening. Like I am going into all the world, even when I'm at home in Tennessee. Yeah. And it feels like life is normal and ordinary. And so it's always a beautiful reminder just of the seeds that we get to plant and the things that we get to be a part of in these people's lives.
Absolutely. Well, one thing that you've just done that is going to be an incredible impact as well is your new book. It's called Sweet Sound. So tell me how. Yeah, I was going to grab a copy. Do you have?
I know. I have one right here.
Woohoo! Woohoo! So tell me how the book came about. For me, I'm in the process of finishing my first book, and it's harder than I thought in a way, and it's also like, okay, I have all these ideas for other things I want to, like, it's both of those. Did you find that too?
Yes, definitely. I think for me, like I've been in this space of being focused on kids and families since 2008. I'd done some things before that, but that's kind of when I went full-time focused on kids and families. And I've known all of these years that there was very little out there that a church could get their hands on as a resource to train people that are helping them accomplish worship in their classrooms. But it just, even though I knew there was a need there and that nothing was really fulfilling that need, at the same time, it just wasn't the right time. Like I wasn't ever feeling God pushing me saying, okay, go do something about it. And so really, as I walked through 2020, and obviously that was such a strange year for so many of us. And as someone who normally travels and does a lot of live events at churches and whatnot, it was a very, very strange year for me. And so, as I was just living life and walking stuff through, I just became increasingly confident that God was telling me, now's the time. I want you to sit down and write this book. And at the same time, it felt like he had given me time on a silver platter that he was handing over to say, all right, like there's no excuses because you're not busy doing these other events and other things. And so when I sat down to write, honestly, like I was surprised at how easy it was. And I realized just how much of the things that are in the book and really so much more, as I was getting to a certain point in the process, I realized, okay, I've got to prioritize content, because I've got more to say than what fits in one book. And so, what needs to be here, what can be in this other thing. And honestly, I've got several more that I know I want to write and be a part of. But for me, it really came down to thus saith the Lord. I knew that he was telling me, now's the time, I want you to do this. And so it was an act of obedience. And I sat down and wrote, and every time I did, it would be one of those things when the time was up and I had to leave, to go do whatever thing. I was always like sad, because it was like, I had more that I knew I was ready to like pour out. And it was always sad when it was like, time's up, you got to go do this other thing. So it's been a fun journey. I'm excited for it.
So the theme of the book is kids in worship, the power of kids in worship. So let me just ask you flat out, what is or why is there power of kids worshiping through song?
Yeah, well, I mean, God created all of us to worship. I'm just going to put that out there first and foremost. But I would encourage those of you listening, like, take some time to just do a search of the scriptures that are in the Bible that talk about worship and praise and children, because there's quite a few of them. And in particular, I remember exactly where I was, what the situation was years and years back, that I came across Psalm 8, 1 and 2 in the Bible. I can picture what my office looked like. I was full-time on staff at a church at that point, and was just really getting my toes wet with making music for kids. It was kind of something they had put on my plate at the church. It's not necessarily like I had some grand vision and dream for it at that point. It was just more so making it happen for our local church family. And I came across Psalm 8, 1 and 2 in the Message translation. It says, God, brilliant Lord, yours is a household name. Nursing infants gurgle choruses about you, and toddlers shout the songs that drown out atheist babble. And the Passion Translation as well is super impactful. It talks about shutting Satan's mouth. And if we fast forward in time, even to actually the Palm Sunday story in the New Testament, as the kids are crying out, Hosanna, and people were questioning that, Jesus himself quoted Psalm 8:2. He said, have you never heard? And so I don't think we often think about how even kids in worship had a part to play in our salvation story and just that process of what Jesus went through leading up to the cross. But I remember being in my office when I came across that verse, and it was one of those moments where I was kind of like, did that say what I think it just said, and like, rewind, let's read that again. I realized for me, it was something I needed to put in front of me on a regular basis to increase my vision and my understanding, to realize that I wasn't just doing a task. I wasn't just doing a job, but I was doing something that the Bible shows us has supernatural power attached to it. And when we are pushing play on songs and creating opportunities for kids to participate in worship, we're not just singing songs, but we are unleashing God's power to be at work in our classrooms. I believe that spills over into our hallways, parking lots, all of it. And so that's why I believe kids in worship is so powerful.
So we are all about helping churches with their worship experience, knowing that it spills over. It goes beyond Sunday. It's the discipleship. It's the the living it out. And so, tell me, if kids have power in worship, how can we disciple them to know how to use that power well? How do the practices go beyond Sunday?
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, it's wanting to help kids through the, times of worship that we create in our services, our classroom, Sunday morning, whatever day of the week it might be that you have programming for them. I want to create opportunities for them to experience the presence of God, because I believe if they taste and see his presence and his goodness, in those moments, it's something that they'll hunger and thirst for more of. And so I really feel like Sunday is just kind of walking them through that experience of engaging in worship and how to do that, kind of in a sense, holding their hand as they kind of journey through this process. Because I want to teach them through that example and through that repetition of worship and the knowledge and information about what worship is and why we're doing it and how they can take part in it. Because I think you'd have to give some practical information and instruction tied to that. Not just like, now it's time for us to sing, right. that right there is kind of what's getting us in some of the problems that we're in, and what I'm emphasizing in the book about there could be so much more here. So giving them understanding as to what it is, because music is sticky and we know that music is one of the best learning tools that we have. And so if I'm intentionally using songs that are filled with God's word, filled with God's truth, I know that music is sticking with them for their Monday through Saturday. Right. And those songs are going to come back to their remembrance. But my hope and my prayer and what I want to encourage churches to do as far as thinking about worship as a form of discipleship, as an area that we are building and training Christians, how to walk out and live out every single day, is to realize that when they're going through something, whether they're 16 or whether they're 40 years old or whether they're a senior citizen and something's going on with their job or within their marriage or whatever thing, that they realize they have a hiding place in God's presence, and it is a pathway for them to run to God in everything that they face. And so that's what I want to help, plant the seeds for, start building that repetition in them where they understand worship is a way that I can approach God, because it's going to be with them for the rest of their life.
So there was a portion of your book that I found really interesting where you kind of had a twinge or reaction to somebody who, it was a podcaster, I think, that said, worship is a lifestyle. Yeah. And this phrase hits you weird. So I want to explain that. And also, how does that mesh with worship being a living sacrifice, offering our bodies as a living sacrifice?
Yeah. Well, okay. And worship is a lifestyle. Yes. I'm not saying it isn't. So often when I hear that phrase get used, the reason that it makes my skin crawl and drives me crazy when I hear it is so often I'm hearing it used as a form of an excuse. Okay. And oftentimes I've heard pastors use it, but it's kind of like they're always using that phrase as kind of a Band-Aid crutch situation to kind of downplay what I believe is the power of our musical form of worship. And so, it might be, I know plenty of pastors that aren't music people. And so the praise and worship thing is not necessarily one of their favorite parts of a service, even though they might have it in there, but just kind of where they value that on the scale is different. And so, yes, worship is a lifestyle. And obviously the things that I do and the choices that I make throughout my week, throughout my day, all of that stuff, how I live my life is a form of worship to the Lord. But when you dig into scripture, when you dig into some of the Hebrew words for praise, for worship, you realize that some of those words are specifically attached to music and to instrumentation and to singing. And so, again, so often when I hear that phrase used, it's kind of in this making an excuse category conversation that's happening. And I just realized, you can't remove the musical act of worship from the lifestyle of worship and it still be whole and still be complete. And so if that's an area that you've maybe made excuses in the past, and maybe you've even yourself been like, well, I didn't like that song, or I don't like who's leading this week, or, whatever conditional thing that so many, American churchgoers might have about kind of quantifying when their participation in worship matters. I hope you'll rethink that, because it does matter, regardless of if it's your favorite song or a song that drives you crazy. It does matter if it's your favorite person leading or your least favorite. None of that has to do with why it is that you're participating and expressing the reverence and the honor that's tied to worship. And so, so that's kind of it in a nutshell, of just realizing, helping people understand it's a both and situation. It's not an instead or situation. You can't just worship as a lifestyle and be like, music doesn't matter. Right. Because if I'm going to live out all of those words, those Hebrew words in the Bible and the different action that's attached to it, or the different expression that's attached to it, then that means I've got to include the singing act of worship that's going on in the heavens, might I add. So we're just joining a bigger choir of the saints and the angels, and that song is not ever going to stop.
I like the order that you put this in the book. So you mentioned that, and then you go right into explaining that from David. And you spend several chapters on David and how he's a man of God's own heart, and examples of his worship and why he worshiped and the songwriting and that. So tell me some of that. What did you find in that study?
Yeah, well, there's so much I love about David. Obviously, he's our biggest example of worship in the Bible that we have. I know there's been times in life where I was wrestling with something. It might be something else that I'd heard someone say, and just kind of, duking it out with God, as we do sometimes, asking him questions and just trying to understand. I know what has worked for me as a worship leader. And so sometimes you hear somebody else say something that contradicts that, and you're like, but that actually works really well on a practical side. And so one of those days where I was kind of talking it out with God, I remember him just telling me, look at David. And so that's why I kind of started trying to unpack how he led us in worship, because that's what is happening through the writings that he has in the Psalms as well. I think just a couple practical things. So something I would encourage in Psalm 47:1, it says, come everybody, clap your hands, shout to God with joyful songs. And so one of the things we see in David's writings is that there's practical instruction of how to participate that he is giving us. And so more than just, hey, it's time to sing, it's realizing, and that it's a very short verse, but there's 4 things where he's saying, hey, everybody, that's all of you that are here today. We're going to clap our hands. We're going to shout to God in worship and praise. And we're going to do it, with a smile on our face. And so just realizing that example, that every week while you're up there, it's not that some of the people that aren't participating in your classrooms, in your sanctuary, in the services you have, it's not that they're intentionally thinking like, I'm trying not to participate right now. They honestly just kind of need you to tap them on the shoulder and just guide them into, here's how you do it. Here's how you join in this time of worship with us. So that's one big challenge that I would give people. But I think one of the other most insightful things for me is just realizing that David's reflex was to worship. I do believe that's why he was given the title Man After God's Own Heart, is because he worshiped God, period. But there's a story that a friend of mine had shared with me in 2 Samuel, where David, his own son, had died, and he's hearing the chatter of a servant. He kind of questions to them, like, is this child dead? And they respond, yes. And scripture tells us that David's response to his son dying was to get up, comb his hair, wash his face, change his clothes, and go to the sanctuary and worship. And so if I realized that high up on David's priority list in that moment was to go draw near to God and go pour out his praise and cry out to the one that he knew could help him in that moment. Many of you listening, maybe you can identify with losing a child. Maybe you lost them in the womb. Maybe you lost them after they'd been born on this earth, and you understand that sort of heartbreak. And yet scripture shows us by David's example, it doesn't say he stayed in bed for 2 weeks. It doesn't say he, ate an extra large pizza all by himself or a tub of ice cream. It says he washed his face, combed his hair, changed his clothes, and went to the sanctuary and worship. And so David's reflex was to worship. And that's my desire, is that our churches, from the time that kids aren't adults, but rather from the time that they are young in our preschool classes, will start building kind of like a staircase, this process of helping the people that come to our church learn what worship is, how to engage in it, why we do it, just building upon that class by class, age group by age group. So we develop the kind of worshipers that we hope that we will have one day as they are adults. Because if we're waiting until they're out of college to try to develop this, right, it's going to be a lot harder. But just helping kids understand, just like that muscle that David had built in his life, that rhythm, that reflex that he had, that they can run to God no matter what it is that they face.
What about posture? I know that you wrote a lot about posture and expression. Why does posture matter in worshiping through song?
Well, I believe it matters because if you look at every other category of life, like we know if we're going on a job interview, you should be conducting yourself with certain manners, certain facial expressions, how you sit, what you wear, like all the things. If you're going out on a date and you're, asking someone, like expression and posture matters in every other category of life. And yet, again, it's kind of another one of those areas, kind of like we were talking about before, where it's kind of like it's just an excuse that I feel like a lot of Christ followers have of kind of like, well, I'm worshiping my heart, even if I'm not moving my mouth, or I'm worshiping, even though I'm just sitting there. But yet, again, unpacking some of those Hebrew words for praise, we realize that bowing down is one of the things that we do. Kneeling is one of the things that we do. Outstretched arms is one of the definitions of praise and worship. And so, we're talking about the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and the one who gave his life to free you from your sin and give you eternal life. And if that doesn't trigger something in you to say like, oh my gosh, God, you're greater and I need you, and I want to honor you in this moment, your wood's wet, as they say.
Tell me, let's talk to worship leaders specifically for a second. So how is worship leading more about your leadership and not as much about your musical ability? What if I
I say that leadership or leading worship is more about your leadership ability than your musical ability. By saying that, I'm not saying that, not having musical talent is void, and not.
You don't want me up there. I think is
obviously it is a huge bonus, but when I look at the skill set of my worship leading, it has nothing to do with me singing on pitch, being able to count to 4 or 6 or whatever time signature we're in. It has nothing to do with me, being a drummer being able to play to a click because we're playing to a track. Like, it's not those things. When I think about my ability to engage an audience and communicate with them and teach them and be aware of, are they with me today? Or does it kind of feel like they don't get it and they don't understand? Being aware of my audience so I can make sometimes those shifts, or I can maybe share something that I hadn't even planned to share just because I feel like it could spark something and it could draw them and invite them into what we're doing in a greater way. And those things aren't musical. Those things come down to leadership principles, just like you would be talking about in any form of leadership book or our teaching book of how to connect with the crowd and, how to get them to listen to a story that you're telling or whatever that looks like. It's a lot of those same characteristics. And so I say that especially to children's people. And let me back up and say too, I've led worship for all ages. So yes, I focus my time in this season on kids and families, but I have history leading high school students and college students and adults and all of it. And I realized that so much of my worship leading is actually the same, regardless of the age that I'm leading them in. There's very few nuances about the age groups, but the core of my ability to lead them is the same. And I say that especially just encouraging children's people and their abilities to lead, because I know, they don't always have a dedicated worship leader, or they don't always have the greatest singer in the church, that's maybe helping them lead worship time. And maybe you have to rely on those pre-recorded vocals that are on the recording that you're using. But I just say that to empower them, that if they're great at teaching the lesson and being able to engage the kids through that, I believe they have the skill set needed to engage their kids in the worship time as well. And so maybe that means they don't sing the song into the microphone, but they still can lead the in-between moments. They still can set up the song, introduce the song, and just, tangibly lead their kids in a time of worship. And again, that comes down to leadership ability, not musical talent.
I think me and you have talked before about that's kind of a through line, but the presentation might be different depending on the age group. Like you might wear something different, or louder colors with kids, or things like that. Like it's those things, but not necessarily the leadership line. Am I accurate in that?
Yeah, I would completely say it's the same. So much of the exact same principles. I just, the younger the crowd, the more energetic I might talk, or higher pitched I might talk, or yes, what I wear might change. But, the elements of planning a song set and being aware, are they with me? Are they getting it? Or are they bailing out of the classroom, headed down the hallway? Right. Those are the things that are the same.
Why is evaluation important? You spent some time on this in the book, that it's important to sing old songs and current songs, but also introduce new songs. You want to talk about that some?
Yeah. I mean, again, if we look at scripture, we know that singing a new song is something that's in the Bible. And so I think especially in children's ministry circles, so often you've got some people in there that they've been doing this for years and years. And to be honest with you, it takes time, it takes energy, it takes budget dollars, all of those things attached to investing in a new song. And I think the biggie really is them taking the time to learn a new song. And so oftentimes it can just be easier to be singing the same songs they've been singing for the past 5 years or 8 years because, well, it's been working and I know it. And not saying that you can't sing some of those songs, but I just know that there is something that's life-giving about introducing new stuff. But I would challenge you just to evaluate what you're doing. Talk to other volunteers that are in the room, that just maybe if you're the person that's always on stage, get some perspectives from some of the people helping you that are amongst the kids or in the back, and just kind of ask them, hey, do you feel like our kids are engaged in what we're doing? Because I know firsthand from being someone on stage, sometimes my perspective is a little bit different. I've had days where I thought like that was the best ever, to get off and find out it wasn't, and vice versa, days where I felt like it bombed and wasn't great, only to find out some stories and some testimonies of stuff that I wasn't aware of going on. So that's why I think it's important to talk with your team, talk with your other people. But, this is a harder thing to do with preschoolers, but especially those of you that are working with preteens and maybe elementary kids, just ask some questions, get feedback from them, ask them about specific songs that you're doing. I started that one day. Honestly, I had a couple of new songs that I was on the fence about introducing. And so I was, playing it for a couple of our worship leaders, just kind of being like, do you feel like this song's going to work? Sometimes it's really obvious and, like, we have to do that song. And then sometimes it's kind of like, it could go either way. This could be a win for us, or this very well could bomb. And I try to figure that out, in my office and not on the Sunday morning stage when possible. And so I was kind of wrestling with that. So I got the idea. I'm like, well, let's just ask some students what they think of it. And so I kind of did that, and then ended up like going through and like asking the student about every song we'd been doing like in the past year. And I got some phenomenal feedback that was helpful. So there were songs that were still working great, but she was like, yeah, we're kind of getting tired of it, and it was like, that's fantastic. Like, let's not do it for 3 months. Right. I don't have to break this song and wear it out. I can instead pump the brakes on it and hopefully extend its shelf life to be one of those that can be enjoyed, a handful of times a year, because we're not singing it every other week.
Right.
So I think evaluating what you're doing is always important. And so, set a reminder in your calendar. Maybe you're in a phase you need to do a monthly evaluation. Maybe it's something you could do every quarter, but just periodically reflect on it. And I think another thing with church leaders, they so often are just looking at the ministry and what they want it to look like this close up, and they get frustrated because you're like, the things I have vision for are not happening and we're not making progress, and all of those frustrating moments that I'm sure those of you listening can identify with. But I realize when I stop and actually reflect on where have I seen growth and where have I seen change, and that one, boy that never participated has started singing, like when I stop and reflect and make a list, I realize, hey, there's actually been a lot more progress and growth that has happened over the past few months than I felt like in my frustrations of all the other things that I want it to be. Right. So I think it will be encouraging as well for you just to periodically evaluate and probably help you realize you have more wins along the way than you even feel like you do.
Along these lines, you keep a binder or a record of your weekly song sets. How does keeping this record help you evaluate?
Yeah. And maybe it's like telling us to when I had my church job that I was doing it with a printout and a binder. I mean, it could be a Google, online document now. But I think accessing it for a variety of things. I was the one that was crafting our sets. So I was doing it for me because it's easy for me to look at and go, okay, what was the new song we introduced last month? Okay, well, I need to keep that song happening in some of our sets this month. It's easy for me to look back and go, oh, we haven't sang such and such song in 3 months. So I need to bring that one back, because it's been a minute. So it's a good way for me to be able to just see what's been happening. Now I'll kind of share this in another context, because maybe you're a situation where different people are even getting to plan the worship sets. Well, them having access to this document online where they can see what the songs have been this past month, so that they're not singing the same, unless it's a new song that you're intentionally repeating because you're still introducing it to your group. They can see like, oh, well, this song I was thinking about doing, they used it last week, right. Or, it's been sung 2 out of the last 4 weeks. So right. I probably don't need to put that song in my set today. I need to choose something else. So I think it's a great point of reference as well, even if you have more of a collaborative planning team or worship leaders that are picking their own songs and stuff, just so that you look like you're organized in planning your sets instead of just kind of everybody doing their own thing and it's free for all and whatever happens. So I find it super helpful.
How does it relate to the palettes? You mentioned this phrasing of the palettes of children, especially. Yeah. Does that also apply to adults? Tell me how that.
Yeah. I think so. So I'll share this quick story. I go to, because this is what makes so much sense to me. I go to church with a lot of Australians, and one day our associate pastor was talking about Vegemite, and he's talking about how often Americans don't like Vegemite, and he was comparing it to the fact that Australians love it. It's kind of like the equivalent of a PB&J to an Australian kid, as far as just like how common that food is, given to them to eat. And I completely understood it because I've been to Australia, and I remember going at the first morning at breakfast and being excited that I was there and like trying the Vegemite and taking one bite and just kind of being like, that's disgusting. I want no part in it. And so, him telling this story, like I'm cracking up in my seat because I'm just kind of realizing like, yeah, exactly. But he was talking about the difference as to why that Australian loves their Vegemite. It's not a sweet condiment, it's actually savory. I think that's probably why us Americans don't like it, is we're expecting it to be like jelly or something. Mm-hmm. And so he was just talking about how, the Australian from an early age starts eating it and then they love it. And it's, a total comfort food to them. We eat it probably at a much later point in our life, in our maturity of our taste buds and kind of what we're looking for and what we're expecting. We taste it and we don't like what we taste, just in a common fashion. And I instantly was like, oh my gosh, like that makes so much sense here. And I think even it's a mirror of what happens in our churches where, sometimes maybe your kids' worship is great and your student ministry worship isn't, or other churches, your kids' worship is a total question mark and you have great student ministry worship. It can be all across the board within our churches. And for all practical matters, we're waiting until we get this adult that has now started their career, or has given their life to Christ at whatever later point in life. And we're trying to develop this love and desire in them to worship. And it's an uncomfortable thing that they're not used to, as opposed to starting when they're young and teaching them about worship, what worship is, and giving them practical ways that they can engage and helping them experience the presence of God, all those things that we've talked about, so that it develops within them. And it's something that they desire, just like that Vegemite, because they've been eating it their whole life. And yeah, it just made a ton of sense to me. And so I hope and pray that more churches will become intentional about developing the palates of the kids in their ministry to love the presence of the Lord and love, expressing their thankfulness, their gratitude, their amazement, their wonder for all the things that God is doing in their lives, past, present, future, through our times of worship. And so I believe it's a game changer.
I do too. And I think it will stay with them for decades and into adulthood when they are worshiping through song as adults. I think they'll remember the lessons learned as kids. Tell me about using hand motions or dance motions with kids songs. What are your feelings on that?
I've got a lot of feelings. I've got 2 chapters worth of feelings. In a nutshell, they are great and they can be helpful. I feel where our downfall is that we're forcing them to be in every second of every song. And honestly, like if you and I were sitting down and you were telling me all the problems that you're encountering in your church and where your points of frustration are and how you feel your group is responding and all of that, there's a group of kids in your ministry that they don't want to participate in worship with those motions. And so the biggie for me is that if every second of every song is asking them to do that, I'm never giving them an opportunity to engage in worship in a way that they would be more willing to participate. And so motions can be great. I think they sometimes only make sense on specific parts of the songs.
Right.
And so that would be my challenge, is do it where it makes sense. If it makes sense on the chorus, only do it on the chorus. If it makes sense in the verse, then fine, do it on the verse, and don't do it on the chorus or whatever that looks like. But don't feel like you have to do motions for every single thing. I think it's an easy way to give us a false sense of participation rather than actually be developing an expression of worship within the individual. And so, I think I unpack it in great detail.
You do. I think one thing that you mentioned is sometimes we're so focused on the hand motions, whether that's from the leader perspective, getting the hand motions right, and the kids being so active and doing the dance move or the hand motion, that my mind is on that and not on the vertical. I'm not saying always, but I think that we can struggle with that.
Yeah, I think, and it reminds me, I shared about a church that I was kind of consulting with, and I was watching what they were doing one Sunday morning, a church in Florida. And, as I was watching, and they had a ton of kids on stage that were serving on their worship team, and, all the things sounded good on paper. But as I kind of watched them do the songs, I realized there were more kids only focused on doing the motions. And that's even from the kids worship team on stage. And they were never moving their mouth. And I wrote down, I was like, are you raising singers or dancers? That one was going really well, but we were missing out on that actual verbal expression of saying, God, you're so amazing. Yeah. I want to celebrate you. I want to give you thanks. I want to honor you. And so I think there's times the motion is a distraction, but I talk about it. It's just about becoming more intentional and doing it when it makes the most sense, and also not putting all your eggs in that basket. Because it also by not putting all your eggs in that basket, I believe you'll actually engage more kids in your ministry in times of worship.
Good. All right. Let's end on this question, and then I'm going to play a game with you. All right. So let's end on the why. Why does it matter? And I asked you this a little bit earlier. Why does it matter how you lead kids and even adults in worshiping through music and song? Why? Give me the why.
Man. Well, it matters because we were made to do it. That is one of the parts of being a Christian, that, ultimately it's just God's creation. He made God's creation to bring him praise. And so, like a super version of that is our life as a Christian. We should be bringing praise to God. Right. And so when we're not engaged in that area, we're immature, as far as that goes. So many times in our churches, we focus on making sure our people understand that missions is important, or that giving is important, or that serving our community is important, and loving our neighbor. And, all of these things that they are all things that are in the Bible, and we should be taking part in those things. But yet again, we can look at the music time of worship as just kind of an optional thing. Like, we can do it if we want, we can do it if it feels good. But my challenge to everyone listening and to all the people that read the book, because I believe I wrote it for ministry leaders, but I believe it will impact every individual that reads it, to better understand that your sacrifice of praise matters. Your song of worship matters. It's what God created you to do. And also by you expressing in that, there's an exchange that happens as well between you and God. And I believe even in those times that you choose to worship when you don't feel it, or when there's something hard that's going on in your life, I believe there's a shift that happens in our spirit, sometimes in our atmosphere, sometimes in the natural, in our situation, that then takes place. And so my heart breaks for those that aren't engaged in this area, because I realize there's so much more that they could be experiencing. And my hope and prayer is that they'll dive in with both feet.
Well, I'm really glad that you were obedient, and maybe it was 2020 that just gave you the time to do it. But I think the book's going to it already is making an impact, and I'm really excited to see what the Lord does with it. So thank you for your obedience there. I'm really excited for you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you for all this insight. Now I have a game to play with you. Would you be willing to jump in with me?
I think so.
All right, here we go. All right.
Hopefully I don't change my mind.
I don't think so. All right. Okay. So we're going to play a little game called 5 Questions. All right. These are going to be rapid fire questions to let people know a little bit more about you and just to have some fun. Okay. So all of these questions are related to you. Okay. So keep that in mind. Okay. They're going to be rapid fire. You ready?
Okay.
Okay. I got my cards here, so I'll have some visual aids. All right. Rapid fire. Here we go. All right. Number 1, according to the U.S. Air Force, they used a military strategy called chaff, which released what sparkly substance from the back of warplanes to confuse the radar of enemy forces? Do you know this?
I did not know this.
Okay, you want to play match game? Here we go. Here's match game. Ready? Can you call it? What bomb? I'm looking for the blank.
Was it a glitter bomb?
Yes. Glitter bomb. Yep.
I had no idea that glitter was used in battle.
Yes, that's where it came from. There you go.
I want to add too. Right. I will unpack this at some point in my life, but when I was working on the Heartbeat curriculum that we had made to help teach kids about worship, I came across something as I was like in these like lexicon concordant things, like unpacking these Hebrew words. And there was something in the Psalms talking about the song leader, and the description was to glitter from afar.
Wow.
And I was like, I have never felt more seen in this moment, and like confirmed that I'm doing the thing that I was made to do.
There you go.
I thought it was so cool.
Keep the glitter going. All right.
But I love that. I'm going to have to research that.
There you go. Yep. All right. Number 2, your name is Yancy. I'm taking you back. What famous Olympic figure skater was in the news for getting whacked in the knee when you were a teenager?
Nancy Kerrigan.
You are correct. That is correct.
I'm so aware of that one.
There you go.
That was a tragedy.
Okay, it was. All right, number 3. Here we go. This will be fun. All right, think of a popular worship song. Don't tell me. Think of a popular worship song in churches being sung right now. Don't tell me.
Okay,
you got it? All right, now think of another one. Okay, now let's see if we can match.
Okay.
Name.
The Blessing.
Wrong. I'm thinking What a Beautiful Name. You are incorrect.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Number 4. All right, we just got a rare opportunity in the eastern part of the U.S. You got snow in Nashville recently. We got snow in South Carolina. All right, here we go. What album that you have produced in your career most resembles this shift in climate? I'm looking for an album name.
My first one.
Yeah?
Big Weather Change.
That is correct. There you go. See? My Wikipedia going. All right. I got one more and then a bonus. All right, here we go. This is going to take you back. Name the song from these lyrics. Ready? Okay. Pulling out my big black book, because when I need a word defined, that's where I look. So I moved to the L's quick, fast, in a hurry. Threw on my specs, thought my vision was blurry. You know what? I looked again, but to my dismay, it was black and white with no room for gray. You see, a big V stood beyond my word. And that's when it hit me that
love is a verb.
Love is a verb. That is correct. Down with
I was hoping it was going to be DC talk.
All right, here we go. All right, here's your bonus. All right, 10 seconds on the clock. Name 5 Christian music artists or bands from the 90s. 5 bands from the 90s. Ready? Go.
Audio Adrenaline, Carolyn Aaron, Stephen Curtis Chapman, Petra, Margaret Becker, Out of the Gray. Cindy
we'll accept
Morgan.
Petra, but Petra was. they were still going. They were. John Schlitt still has the hair. They were still going. I'm pretty sure I still saw him in the 90s. Yeah, it was like No Doubt and stuff like that was 90s from then.
Yeah.
Was it called No Doubt?
I know. I lived in Oklahoma, so it had to. That's why I know for a fact it was the 90s. But they still had like a monstrosity stage situation I remember. So it was probably early 90s, but there was a whole lot of trussing and crazy keyboard rigs. They had a great concert. So I'll tell you a story here. So I interviewed him. I interviewed him right when I was in radio and Petra had just done their farewell thing. Yeah. And I interviewed him and I said, I'm like a young college student. I'm like, hey, what's next for you? And he goes, I have no idea. And he started getting emotional and crying. Like, I don't know what God has for me. I'm like, I was not expecting that. So I got to talk with him and interview him again and just kind of relive that I got him in a weird spot where he was like,
in transition. All right, so there you go. You did good. You did good.
Okay.
Way to go.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it. And again, blessings on your book. I know it's going to do awesome.
Thank you.
Hey guys, Grant here from the 1230 Media team. Like the content on our podcast? Be sure to check out MakingSundayHappen.com. There you'll find an entire archive of every podcast we've ever produced. We've even categorized every episode by your ministry area, meaning you can jump right to episodes on church media or production, worship, volunteers, first impressions, communications, and more. It's all free training to help you make Sunday happen. Start listening today. Visit MakingSundayHappen.com. That's MakingSundayHappen.com.
The show notes for this episode are available now at MakingSundayHappen.com.
Well, hey guys, thanks so much for hanging out this week. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can just search 1230 Media or Making Sunday Happen on YouTube to find us. Well, next week will be a family episode of our show as I'll welcome our Director of Ready Made Media, Anthony Raccanello. We call him Rack. Rack also works with Epic Church in Philadelphia, and they are really changing the game when it comes to church online. We're going to talk all about their secret strategies next week. We'll go out there and create some incredible worship experiences this weekend. I'll catch you next week.
Making Sunday Happen is a production of the ministry of 1230 Media. For show notes, archive episodes, and more free resources for your church, visit MakingSundayHappen.com.